do that right now. Good. Okay, we're now recording. All right. So hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm the chair of the Undergraduate Business Council's VISIT Committee. The goal of the VISIT Committee is to connect students with more diverse career options than the current Macombs Recruiting Center allows for, and really get them to learn more about less traditional career options that are still very valid, but the people are often underemphasizing in the business school. So today we'll be speaking with our wonderful panelists about entrepreneurship and innovation. And so we'll start off by giving some instructions. Y'all just give a brief intro, a brief overview of your background, and then kind of like what your current venture is that you're involved in, and kind of just giving some brief context so that the students can better understand your responses to future questions. You don't have to go into too much detail right now. We'll have some time for that later for you to go really more dive into the current venture that you're at. Just giving a brief introduction of yourself, your background, and the current venture that you're at to the point where students can understand the other questions better. So we can go ahead and get started with Avi.
Thank you, Ryan. Good to meet everybody here. My name is Avi Gupta. I am a third-time entrepreneur. My most recent company over the last decade was in the real estate, data, AI, and technology space. I had done an e-commerce startup before that, and now I'm building a new venture in the insurance technology space, which is a direct-to-consumer company as opposed to business-to-business companies in my previous endeavors. I have an academic background in computer science with a master's from Berkeley and a PhD from Michigan Ann Arbor. And I started off, like many people, at least in the Silicon Valley, as a techie guy, working on product development. And then over the last couple of decades or so, I've transitioned slowly onto the business and entrepreneurship side.
Awesome. Thank you, Avi. We get Seneca to go next.
Did you say Dunmore? Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Hi, guys. So my name is Seneca Dunmore. I am a motivational speaker and also speaker coach. Started my motivational speaking business in 2015 after I walked away from corporate America in 2014, and literally a year later became international. So that's what I do. I coach new and aspiring speakers how to basically maximize and monetize their speaking business and how to go from national to international.
Awesome. Thank you. We can get Shamawn next.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My bad. It says Bridge Builders to the new generation. That is my business. But my name is Shamawn Wright. I am the CEO and founder of Bridge Builders to the New Generation, which is a nonprofit organization really based to make sure that marginalized communities get college and career access. We are currently contracted with 2 different high schools out here in less than about 8 months. But before that, I actually started in education as a teacher. I felt like I could be doing a lot more in work. And even when I was teaching, I was doing a lot of mentorship, a lot of after school programming. So I literally just stopped teaching, gave that up, went back to school, got my master's. Right now I'm in a doctorate program. And so with that being said, I started my own nonprofit organization. So that's a little bit about myself, and hopefully you'll learn a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamawn. Next we can get Jeremy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy Smith. I run a company called Civitech. It's all designed around building technology for elections. So political candidates, government tech, counties, cities, and secretaries of state. And my background is military. So I spent 12 years in the Army, focused on removing landmines, IEDs, booby traps, and then moved into hostage rescue and counterterrorism. And so I'm a Texas native here in Austin, and kind of very interested in forms of public service.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. Next we can get Kim.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Kim, one of the co-founders and the CEO of Topl. What we do is we actually built a blockchain from scratch that helps businesses prove their ethical and sustainable practices. And so we have been, we started the company actually out of Rice in 2017. I was finishing up my PhD at Rice when I met my 2 co-founders. So definitely love talking to students about starting things while you're in college and in university. I am originally from South Africa. I have a lot of my background is STEM. So I have a master's in econ, a math undergrad, and came to the US actually out of a family of mining and agriculture. So spent a lot of time in the first mile of the supply chain, learning a lot about the claims that we make that happen with our products at source. And hence my whole life has become this helping companies actually that are changing the world prove that they are changing the world in the way that they are claiming that they are doing it. So yeah, that's me. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for being here, Kim. And last but not least, we have Tom.
Yeah, last but not least, right? So, hey, everyone, I'm Tom Smith. I actually graduated from UT back last May, so almost a year ago. I'm an Air Force contracting officer, but I'm also the CEO and co-founder of Vrify Health. We're building a fully autonomous mental health care triaging agent that takes its form as a virtual therapist. And so, yeah, so my background, I started a program in the Air Force when I was a junior at UT. Went through all the entrepreneurship stuff at UT. So happy to answer any questions or, offer up any sort of free advice about, different resources you can take a part of, or, if you're considering a different untraditional route like the military or just entrepreneurship, happy to offer some advice there too. So thanks for having me, Ryan.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for the intros, and thank you all so much for taking your time out of your day to be here. We're going to get started with first our group questions. So each of these questions will be asked to multiple panelists, and I'll specify which ones, and then y'all can just go in any order and speak to that question at whatever length you'd like. So the first question is, was the process of pitching for investment like, and how can a prospective entrepreneur prepare for the funding process? This is for Avi and Shamawn. You're muted, Avi.
Thank you. Yeah, I've done it a few times now. So to me, pitching to entrepreneurs, of course, it depends on what stage you're pitching at. Let's just talk about, somebody who's pitching for a brand new venture, first round of funding. It's always a sales process, right? You got to treat it as a sales process. It's a numbers game for you, and it's a numbers game for the VC. So you got to keep that in mind. And I think one of the key things to realize is sort of the venture capitalist psychology. These guys get pitched every day, right? They get pitched, tens of times every day and thousands of times over the course of a year. 99% of the time, they say no. And it's those rare 1% of the times or less when they do say yes. They want to say yes a lot more, but they simply can't, right? They only make 8 to 10 investments every year. A partner at a VC firm makes 1 or 2 investments every year. So you got to, sort of prepare yourself mentally that it is going to be, a sales process. It's a long haul game, and you got to prepare for rejection. It's really not rejection. You're just not a fit for them. Doesn't mean your idea is bad. So I think that's sort of the mental preparation that you need to go into this place with. Secondly, you got to be prepared, right? I think you got to, especially with the people that are starting off for the first time, I think you got to have a big, bold, grandiose vision, but at the same time, have a very sort of narrow, niche way to start off with, right? Otherwise, you're sort of all over the map and you never really get anywhere anytime soon. So big vision with something that's narrow enough to get you some traction quickly. Secondly, you got to have something defensible, right? You got to make sure that whatever you're pitching is unique in some sort of way, and it's sort of yours that you can hang your hat on. And I think thirdly, you got to have the right team in place. You got to convince these guys why are you the right person to make this a success, right? So either you as well as whatever complementary team members that you have on board should be credible enough to go tackle the problem that you're trying to say. And I think fourthly, before you start pitching, have some product market validation, as they call it, right? Make sure that it can be as simple as a survey, it can be as simple as a mock-up that you've tested with a handful of customers, or it can be a little bit more complicated, like a prototype or something. But have some sort of a product market fit validation so that you can go in there with credibility and also sort of confidence that this problem is a real one and that you have a solution that people will actually buy. And I think finally you got to have a distribution strategy, right? It's often said, if you build it, they'll come, never works, right? You got to build it and you got to figure out how they're going to come even before you start building it. So have a scalable, efficient distribution strategy that is believable and that can be sort of cost effective and can be sort of built out at scale. So I think those are the 4 or 5 key ingredients. But first and foremost, the mental game, right? You've got to go into this knowing that this is a sales process. It's got to take its time.
Thank you, Avi. I think Avi did an amazing job actually describing that. So what I'm going to really talk about more so is like I am going to really talk about my own process, right? Because I'm a first generation entrepreneur. So I really didn't have the network or the resources on what it means to be an entrepreneur. So I fall under the category of a nonprofit organization, right? And so being a nonprofit organization, a lot of times you do charity, education, community type of work. But my nonprofit more so focused on like the education portion on really how can we maximize the opportunity of getting more students of color to higher education. And so for me, it was really difficult, but I feel like the biggest piece was to really find your targeted audience, right? What does your audience look like? Who are you selling it to? And then also who's going to benefit from your product or from your company or from your benefit. And so for me, I feel like it was so difficult because I try to figure out the best person to partner with. And so I tried to do it with the church. It didn't work out. And I was trying to do my programs through this church. And so I was like, okay, let me take a step back, try to figure out what I need to do, like try to reevaluate who my target audience was. And that was more so people of color or students of color that come from low income communities. So what I did was I took that, designed my scopes of services. Now my scopes of services was more so designed to strictly show what my organization is about, what programs we offer, right? And for me to pitch this to the school district. So that's what I did. I ended up going to the school district out in Antioch, California. So I'm based in the Bay Area. So I went to the school district and I pitched them in my scopes of services. And so with my scopes of services, I generally showed them, okay, this is our target audience. This is how we're going to improve and make sure that we go ahead and get them to college and higher education, right? We're going to help with the retention rate. So for myself, I was able to really kind of dictate and show them literally what I want to do through my scopes of services. And for myself, like I said before, this is kind of like the start of my business. And so we first got a first contract within the first 6 months, actually during the pandemic, literally when the pandemic first started. And because I was able to really think about my target audience, think about who this is going to serve, what school district I want to go into, that's what kind of caused me to really get the school district and the schools to invest in my business, right? And also too, I feel like the biggest thing what a lot of entrepreneurs first try to start off with, I know we all know our worth and what that means, but for myself, I really wanted to take a step back, start off with a smaller contract to let people know and show them that this right here works. And, you know, with the data that we collect, with the students that go on to higher education, because eventually when they see that, okay, this is a program that is actually thriving, this is working, now that's when we go ahead and we pitch for some more money. So that's a little bit about my own how I started within the entrepreneurship route. And so, yeah, so that's all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank y'all both so much. That's a super insightful, especially I think a lot of people don't really know like what the actual process looks like when they're trying to pitch or what they should focus on. So I think both of y'all's answers covered all the ground and were super insightful. And y'all kind of briefly touched on this idea of a team, right? You need people to work with that are going to help you succeed and that investors will believe in. So getting a little bit more into that, being that teamwork is one of the most important factors for a successful venture, how do you find the right people for your venture and how do you grow a team? And this question is for Jeremy and Tom, the two Smiths.
Tom, you want to go first as the since you went last time?
You got it. You got it, Jeremy.
Okay. So this is something I think about a lot. I come from a background, like I spent my entire adult life in the military, like in a context in which talking about a team and talking about team building and doing team building is basically like everything that I have lived for that portion of my life, team sports before that and everything else. And so in building my team, 2 years ago, it was just me. And now I have something like 62 people. And so I basically every 3 months am rethinking of the idea of what is my team like now. And it's a constant changing culture, right? You're essentially doing that. But at the beginning, when you're thinking about early stage and like what kind of entity you want to make, in general, I look for more generalists whenever possible. If you are going to whatever problem you're going to solve, you most likely need some kind of specialist around a thing. If you're going to be blockchain focused, right, that you have to have someone who knows that piece. That's just critical, right? You can't offer that value without it. But in almost everything else you're going to encounter, you need people who will at least operate as generalists. Even if they have a specific domain expertise, they've got to put on a sales hat from time to time. They may have to hold down operations. You may need them to lead HR processes. You might need them to go take and execute a whole project from start to finish over 3 months. And people who are broadly capable, broadly curious about the world, that I tend to find like are more flexible and better able to suit those needs. And in particular, I look for like grit, integrity, passion, and like flexibility. Like, will they work this problem hard enough for us to get there? Will they be honest about it? Because like, we're not going to succeed if we aren't honest with ourselves. If we're the ones delivering this, we are trying to sell other people on the idea. We're trying to recruit people to the idea. We should be the most honest about its flaws and faults internally to one another. And no one else should be better at that than us. And you have to really want to do this, to take the pay cut and to make sure that it's successful from the beginning, to want to own equity in it. When you find those people, you've got to empower them. You can't control, like if you try to squeeze too tightly, right? Like things just like they end up squirming out of your grasp. Empowering people, those are the kind of people you want to work with. Like surround yourself with 5 people who are better than you, so that you are the weak link. That means you're going to get that. That's a good team. And the last thing is, like, to recruit good people, you've got to show your values up front. You need to sell them on joining you. So you have to be out there. You have to network. You've got to talk to others. You have to be willing. It's like dating. You have to be willing to put yourself out there. You have to ask. And be honest about what you're trying to do. There's a lot of pressure with a VC conversation or with a hiring conversation to like give ground to make the conversation go easier because you're hopeful. What you will learn is you have to do this 1,000 times, and it is better to be honest at the beginning than to have a hard conversation later about, we're not actually going to do the thing I sort of hinted you might be allowed to, right? It's much, much better to find people who are fully aligned with you than to struggle later down the line. So my advice is, like, look for people who you would want to be around. Like, would you want to be more like this person if you're going to spend your time with them? Because you're going to spend a lot of time with them, and you're going to become more like them. You're going to take on each other's habits. So look for people who show that kind of value in the world. And find people who are actually genuinely interested in what you want to do, and show them why. Like, express why you're passionate about this. Talk to them about what it means to you. Create good values from the beginning. And I think you will find people attracted to that.
Yeah, that was a really, really good answer. And good thing I prepared everything that was not what Jeremy said too, because I actually wanted to talk about more like, intimate setting of when you're first starting out with a company and you're trying to choose your founding team. And like, I was really fortunate in that, like, my background with the military, I've been able to network with some really, really bright people who are like really resilient, but also more problem solvers. And like Jeremy described, they're people that are a lot smarter than me, and people that I want to work with, and people who are, stubbornly optimistic, but at the same time dynamic and choosing, like, and being resilient. So I've been fortunate that I haven't had a co-founder breakup, but 2 people I'm very close with actually have. And so I've seen them go through that process. And it's something that not a whole lot of people want to talk about, because like co-founder breakups, like, yeah, they really do wreck a lot of companies. I've seen one company get wrecked by it, and I've seen one company come out, strong on the other side. And I think it's a really, really important decision to be made, especially as college students, is like, a lot of people, especially investors, unfortunately just don't take college students like super seriously when they're just coming to them with an idea, versus if they have like a co-founder with them, or, they have a product built out. And a lot of times, like, unless you're just like an unreal person, like, you don't necessarily have all the skills capable, capable to like build out a cool product. So you're going to need a co-founder. And so when you're having this conversation, or when you're thinking about someone to bring on as a co-founder, I don't necessarily think it's the best idea to just bring on someone you're just really good friends with. That being said, like, if you do bring on someone you're friends with, make sure you both go into this relationship with a pragmatic sort of outlook, as like, this is a business, like, this business might fail, this business might go through hardships like Jeremy was describing. And like, we want to stick together as a team. Like, we have like a cool vision for the future, and we want to go and execute on that vision. Something that I've also thought about a lot recently too, especially when you're bringing on a new person, or bringing on a potential teammate, or a co-founder even in those early stages. So someone actually gave this advice to me, and it's actually Catherine Allen. I'm not sure if y'all know her. She was saying how, like, when she went out to actually bring on her current co-founder, what she did is actually have a trial period. So she had this conversation with her current co-founder, said, hey, for for 3 months, what we're going to do is we're going to work on this idea. And after 3 months, I'm going to make the decision of whether or not this relationship's working out. And if it's not, then I'll pay you like a certain cash amount. And if it is, then let's bring you on as a co-founder and let's go solve this problem together. Let's go build this business together. And that's something to keep in mind. Is like a lot of people don't really think about these like unconventional ways of bringing on a new team member, but like you got to think outside the box. Otherwise, you're going to be like, definitely in the beginning. And I've seen people, in those situations. Another thing too is that when you're having these conversations with an early employee or with the co-founder, make sure it's like very clear how you're going to have some sort of vesting agreement. How like if they leave after a year, they're going to get nothing of your company, nothing of your IP, nothing of your idea. They're not even a part of it, basically. A normal vesting schedule, for those of you who don't know, is a 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff, which means that after a year, they don't get any equity until they've been there for after a year. And then it's retroactively awarded. And then you're awarded equity every month based, on a 4-year schedule. If you guys haven't read this book yet, you should. It's called Venture Deals. It's written by Brad Feld. He's the founder of Techstars. Like you should go out and you should read it, and you should read it again like 5 more times. Like it's really good. The person who recommended me to read that is a partner at General Catalyst. Like she clearly knows what she's talking about. Venture Deals, Brad Feld. I think I answered the question, Ryan. Let me know. I'm sorry if I rambled.
No, you're totally good. That's super insightful. And I'd like to give like a really real perspective. And I think you guys covered like 2 different bases that are both really important for how to build a successful team, which is awesome. Next, this question is going to be for Seneca and Kim. You'll both have really diverse and interesting backgrounds. So I wanted to know more about them, give you an opportunity to talk about it a little more in detail. How has your background helped you in your entrepreneurial ventures? And that can be education, that can be previous jobs, that can be parts in your life that led you to where you are now. And do you think that certain backgrounds prepare people better than others to become an entrepreneur, to capitalize on those opportunities?
Okay, so I'll go first. So I received my Bachelor's of Science from Tuskegee University and went on to receive my master's in Management Information Systems from Texas Southern University. So the bulk of my corporate experience was in information technology, specifically around recruiting, business development, and contract negotiation. So when I finished my master's, I moved to the East Coast and I worked for a multi-billion-dollar human resources consulting firm. And a big part of my job responsibilities were contract negotiations, specifically around IT contracts, which came pretty easy for me because I had an IT degree. I knew the technology because I had done both front end and back end development. And I'm naturally an extrovert, so I'm energized by people. So at a very young age, in my mid-20s, I had an opportunity to work with C-level executives negotiating multi-million-dollar technology contracts. And at that time, there weren't a lot of women in technology, especially women of color. So I didn't really see the benefit of the opportunity when I was in it. It wasn't until I left corporate America to become a full-time speaker and entrepreneur that I really saw what the opportunity was. I didn't realize that my experience in corporate was basically grooming me for my experience as an entrepreneur. Number one, I knew how to negotiate my own speaker fees because I had experience negotiating multi-million-dollar technology contracts in the nation's capital. Number two, I was extremely comfortable in a multicultural, multi-ethnic environment because I was generally the only woman in the room and the only woman of color. And not to mention, I grew up in the southeast side of Houston, Texas, in a neighborhood called Sunnyside, which was considered the 6th most dangerous neighborhood in America at one point. And so, as funny as it sounds, I learned a lot from just the drug dealers in my community, right, about how to package and move products, right? So I learned how to do my own packaging and moving my own products, which are my speaking engagements. So so in terms of a specific type of background, I think you can learn from any environment. I think you can learn from any experience. So, I took everything that I learned in corporate about contract negotiation and I use that in my business. I learned I took everything that I learned in my neighborhood. I applied that to my business. So I don't think one scenario works better than the other. I think it's all about your perspective and how you use it.
Yeah, I love that. It definitely is very similar. Like, so first comment I'm going to make is actually a statistics, as I am a stats PhD. Talk about co-founders, of 55% of unicorns actually have one immigrant co-founder. So talking about backgrounds and actual, being from South Africa and also just like having this like immigration side to me, and also just learning how it was to be an international student in the US, I always talk about also just the divergent thinking that, like, so in South Africa, we have a very traditional way, like you actually decide if you go to med school at like 16. So you start medical school at 18, or you decide you go to law school at 16 and you go to law school at 18. So it's a very strict, there's no like actual general education. It's a very interesting, you know, it's British model, but essentially what I learned coming to the States too as an immigrant was this like divergent thinking and actually thinking through like diverse backgrounds. So when I started hiring, and I've also been in this situation where we went from 7 last March to 21 now. So we grew very quickly as a team. So even in hiring, I had to really think through, you know, who, where, what. So not just like diverse backgrounds from a different STEM degrees or different actual educational backgrounds. We actually now speak about 13 languages in our team, and we're from 10 different countries. And so that's something that I really wanted to bring into the team, specifically because we're so focused on actually, you know, driving. I always say, you know, at Topl, we're social activists that became, you know, social entrepreneurs, building a social enterprise to create social change. So a lot of us is more mission alignment within our company. And so I also sometimes, you know, even when I get certain resumes, I even like have us X mark the names in the schools that are associated with the people in the team or in the recruiting bundle that we have, just because we get biased very quickly. So I think like from a multidisciplinary, so that's just like from a different walks of life and different cultural settings. But I also think what's really interesting is like different. So blockchain by nature, you have computer science, you have, you know, math, you have actual economics. So you have this like convergence of all these different type of divergent topics. So, you know, in our like founding team, the three of us, I'm a statistician by training. My co-founder is a physicist, atomic molecular physicist, and the third one is actually a philosophy major. So the three of us together, I always say, like made up this like very interesting trio. We call it, you know, like there's this quote we call about, it says, sharp intellect must be married to wicked resolve and indomitable courage to be most effective. And the sharp intellect here is our CTO. And the indomitable courage is my chief product officer and chief architect, Chris. And then, yes, obviously I'm the wicked resolve because I don't stop. But I do think the necessity of having like people from different walks of life, and the three of us also come from very different, you know, James comes from a very, like from Louisiana, grew up in a really small town in Louisiana and became this physics PhD at Rice, pretty badass, you know, and then Chris came from Chicago family. So very different types of, and also even from a political perspective. So I try and make sure that even in our team, we have, you know, different types of approaches inside the team. So I do think that the different backgrounds, but the uniting for one mission really helped a lot with, we were all for building Topl, even though we came from extremely different walks of life, has made us a very interesting bunch. And I also try and keep, you know, like the gender number up, even though we're in a blockchain environment, we try and stay at least 40% female if we can. So definitely something that, you know, I'm very focused in on, but I think I see, you know, diversity is like much bigger from an immigration status, from an actual cultural background differences, just in the same, you know, in Texas, you can get different cultural backgrounds even. So yeah, that would be my advice from like different backgrounds when you start gathering with people, is try be challenged by the people around you.
Awesome. Thank both of y'all so much. I think that really shows how important it is to have diversity of background, and also how any background can be applied and you can leverage what you know to help you in whatever venture it is that you're doing. So that's awesome. So thank you all both so much for that. Now, before we get on to audience questions, we'll have kind of a quick question that any of the panelists can volunteer to answer. You don't have to, but if you want to, you can. Just kind of going into like, how do you get the idea for a business? What is your ideation process specifically, or just how do you generally think about you know, taking or capitalizing on an opportunity? And then how do you know if something is worth pursuing as a legitimate business opportunity? Yeah, Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's like a really good and important question, and I want to add like a dimension to it, which is like, is this a problem worth solving? Is a question you should ask yourself. There's a lot of people, if you want to make a new pizza delivery app, if you have a really good idea that is compelling about what would improve in people's lives as a result of that, I don't want to pretend that there's no improvements that could be made, but it's probably not where we need to spend the best and brightest minds of all of our, kind of the various generations and opportunities available to us. And so think about like, what is the problem, or what is the arena in which you want to address, ideally because you understand it, and then like work that problem and go like to the what is the lowest rung on the ladder that you need to go to understand what is the fundamental problem I'm trying to solve, and talk to the people who are doing it. Like ask the end user at whatever level you can, and make sure you actually have an understanding, either through lived experience or by learning from others. Like, is this real? Do people actually want this problem to be solved? Is this something people actually pay for now? Is like a key question if you're from business. Is this something that donors or foundations would give me money for if you're trying to do a more nonprofit route or a government route? And do you actually want to solve this problem? Like, is this a problem that you want to apply your energy to? Like, is it moral or ethical for you to work on this? Is this something that can sustain you? Can you afford your bills, right? Can you take care of your other life obligations? Once you start to dissect some of that, then the question was like, how do you know if it's a legitimate business opportunity? You do the math, right? In the movie The Martian, right? Matt Damon's character, he's on Mars and he's trapped on Mars, for those of you who haven't seen it. And literally the quote is like, at NASA, we do the math, sit there with a spreadsheet and calculate, what is my market? Like, learn, ask other people, like ask other businesses, how much do you spend a year? How much is like publicly reported? What is my total addressable market? Once you know that number, and you can start to look at how much do people pay for this normally, like just ask them, do you pay 10,000 a year? Do you pay 100,000? Do you pay 1,000? You can begin to put together a business plan just by simply knowing like the rough boundaries. If you can see a world into making a sustainable amount of money, which can't be the whole market, because no one has the whole market of anything, right? Like companies have to buy many different things. People have to buy many different things. You can't have all their money. So make sure you're doing real world math on how much they can afford to spend. And then, can you pay your people? Like, can you pay the team that would require to do this? And then, is there enough money left over for an investor to be interested? And that kind of gets you close to the idea of like, can I really make this work based on what I know? And if you don't know, just keep finding out, and like go ask other people and go talk to more people and go try and live it more. If you really understand the problem, then you're getting to that point that Avi made at the beginning. Like, what is the selling point by which I should give you my money to try to solve this? Like, if you want someone to give you their money in the realm of hundreds of thousands of dollars, like, be fair, have some integrity around like, are you a good person to solve that problem? And if not, encourage other people to work that problem, and push your friends to be entrepreneurial. But I think it's very important that you be honest with yourself about, do you even like want to be in this? And don't get trapped. You don't have to choose to spend your life on something you don't want to. So I think it's very important. One piece of advice I would give folks is look at new areas based on need. Like, needs in the world are things like hunger is still the biggest single need in the world, affecting the largest number of people, preventing prosperity, right? Like clean water, desalination from a technology standpoint, from a distribution standpoint, clean air, right? Like new energy, education, constituent services, right? Like there's so many realms in which government technology or nonprofit technology is 20 years behind where food delivery services we got to during the pandemic. And that there's no reason that has to be true. So I think everyone here has the capacity to learn and understand those things. And if you're going to apply your energies to a thing, try to find one that could be significantly improved if you were and your cohort of people were successful at it.
Can I piggyback on that, Ryan? just what Jeremy said, one way I like to sort of distill it down is by looking at it as, is it a painkiller versus a vitamin? Not that there is no market for vitamins. There are, vitamins could be like a video game, right? Yes, we don't need a video game, but yes, there's a big market for video games, right? But again, for me in particular, a painkiller is, I think what Jeremy just said, a painkiller is a must-have, right? This is something that people are looking to solve, a solution for. It could be, that, making a product more affordable. It could be making a product more accessible. Could be making a product more usable. So whatever that be, right? But, I think in the ideation process, try and sort of sift through all the ideas to understand, are you trying to solve, is this problem a painkiller versus vitamin? And then who are you? Are you going to go after a painkiller or a vitamin? Because I think it requires different mindsets, different cultural, sort of habits to go after one or the other. So I think, that's, one way that I try to, sort of analyze, in my current company, which I'm in the process of launching. I looked at life insurance, and I looked at, the good news is there's tons of data out there these days that you can sift through and figure out, is there a market fit? Is there a pain for this? Are people willing to pay for it? How much are they willing to pay for it, etc. In life insurance, for example, 40% of the US people have life insurance, and 90% people believe they need it, but they simply don't have it because it's not affordable, it's not accessible, it's not usable. So therein lied, to me, it was sort of a painkiller in that people need it, people want it, and some subset of them have it, but then there's enough of a greenfield opportunity where we can go after and sort of tap into that latent demand, if you will, and try and solve that need. So that's just another sort of perspective on that.
I'll add one thing. Sometimes your baby is ugly, and if you have an idea and you keep on harping on it, something you cannot necessarily put lipstick on a pig. And I think that means fail fast and fail forward. I think that's one thing that learning that very early on about, like, if you start going down a path, it is extremely important to take like critical feedback and really learn very quickly. If this is worth pursuing, because I see a lot of people wasting a lot of time on things that if they stood back a little bit, they could say, oh, wow, yes, this is not scalable, this is not achievable, my baby's actually ugly. And it's okay sometimes that is the case. But yeah, I think that's all I would add there.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for those responses. Super insightful into the ideation process, which is not something that comes easily to a lot of people. So now we'll get on to audience questions, and we'll see, depending on how many questions there are. I have a couple of other individual questions to ask to specific panelists that I can go into if we aren't getting as many audience questions. But if we are getting audience questions, we'll just keep going through those until they run out or until the panel ends at 7 p.m. So if you have any questions from the audience, go ahead and raise your hand. And then I'll just call on you in order. Okay, Kelly.
Yeah, hi. So this is a question for, I guess, everybody, which is, how do you personally identify and break into new markets, especially when this new market is like a considerably bigger jump? And I think, Seneca, for example, you mentioned going international within just 1 year, which is super impressive, and that's awesome. So, for example, what were some essential criteria for you to make that successful entrance?
Okay, sorry about that. It's one of those things like, anytime there's an obstacle, there's always an opportunity, right? So, at the onset of COVID, nearly 3 million women have left the workforce, right, since February of 2020. And the majority of them left for the very same reasons I left my corporate job back in 2014. They are mentally overwhelmed, they're physically exhausted, they're expected to do more with less. If you're a mother, you've probably been at home for a year with your children, which adds another level of stress. And if you're a person of color, right, we are navigating unprecedented systematic racism compounded by a global pandemic, right? So we're going through all of that. And why is that so important? It's important because for me, I deal specifically with women of color, and women, especially women of color, are now understanding that we have to advocate for ourselves, and we are choosing self over a system, right? So no longer are we abdicating our mental health, our self-care, our family's well-being to a system that was never really designed for us to maximize our highest potential, right? So it's not that women are opting out of work, right? Quite the opposite. Women are now opting into opportunities that support their hopes, dreams, and desires and benefits them in the well-being of their families, which is why even today, more than 1,600 businesses are created every day, and 89% of that number, women of color, right? So when I saw this mass exodus of women from the labor force, I saw an opportunity to equip women with new strategies, new resources, new tools to now succeed in an entrepreneurial endeavor, right? To now transition out of the workforce and do something that they love to do. So it's one of those things where right now, I know the world seems crazy, but I've probably made more money in 2020, right, in 2021 than I did like the last 5 years. So I just monetized the obstacle and turned it into an opportunity. So as some of the panelists said, like there's always an opportunity in the obstacle. And if you have an entrepreneurial mind, if you are a visionary, if you are innovative, you can see that opportunity and turn it into something more. So it's just all about, seeing the opportunity in it. And for me, I transitioned really quickly. I walked away from my corporate job in October 2014. I started my motivational speaking business in May of 2015. And literally by July of 2016, I was doing my first international speaking engagement in South Africa. So Kim, I was in your country on many occasions. So yeah, it's one of those things, like I wrote on my vision board that I was going to be an international speaker, and literally 7 months later, I manifested that. So if it's something that you really desire, I believe that you have all the tools that you need to make it happen. You just have to go after it and not let society's norms or what's going on in the world at that present moment scare you.
Yeah, I love that. That's incredible.
You're welcome.
Did any of the other panelists want to touch on that question? And if not, then we can move on to the next audience question. I'll give it like 5 seconds. Okay, cool. Abigail, go ahead.
Okay, cool. First, I want to thank everybody for coming. It was really interesting to hear all the panelists and your diverse backgrounds in entrepreneurship. I guess my question is kind of more broad, and that's how do you define your competitive advantage? So for me, I'm an early stage founder in the bioplastics industry, right? But surely there are people who are more knowledgeable about this industry than I am. But then when I think about this question, I think about like, oh, like how would Airbnb answer this question? Like what was their competitive advantage, or like how did Uber answer this question? I'm not sure if that makes sense, but if anybody has any advice to provide, I'd really appreciate it.
I can get started, and I'm sure that everybody's got other things to add to that. I mean, I look at a startup as 4 to 5 components, right? There's your product, there is your people, there is your placement, which is your distribution, and then there's pricing and maybe a couple of other things, right? So I think you don't have to be great and differentiated across all of them. I think most of the times you want to pick and choose your battles that are worth fighting for and winning, and that you think that you have a good shot at winning. So pick one of them. I mean, whether it's technology, which could be embedded within the product, whether it's placement, which has got a unique way to get to the end customer in a cost-effective, scalable way, whether it be people, where maybe you have a blockchain expert that's the next thing since sliced bread, and nobody can compete with that person, right? I mean, so I think competitive differentiation can manifest itself in many ways. So you don't have to it doesn't have to be technology all the time, right? That could be pricing as well sometimes, right? That's a game changer. Could be usability, right? Which is part of the product again. So I think you got to figure out what is it that is yours, your unique advantage. And again, it doesn't, in fact, you're better off as an early stage entrepreneur to just do this in a piecemeal way. You may have a grandiose vision, but figure out that one thing where you're going to shine initially and then expand from there. So again, pick and choose your battles, but hone in on that one thing. It doesn't have to be all 5 components of it.
That was great. Thank you.
Abigail, I got a question. Are you talking about like how do you compete against these big companies, or are you talking more about like how do you just get started in a space where you need some sort of technical advantage?
I think more about getting started, not necessarily with competition, but just how do you differentiate yourself? And then even like, when you're pitching, when you're talking about like what makes you different than other companies, or like what is preventing other companies from replicating what you're doing.
Yeah, so I think like you're probably referring to how it's like almost a meme at this point, how like venture capitalists will be like, so why isn't Google doing what you're doing? Or how can you prevent Google from doing this? And it's sort of cliche, but I'm sure you guys have learned in your entrepreneurship classes and you've seen the statistics about how a lot of these big companies that were like, made very well aware of these new innovations failed. Like, Kodak is a good example, Blockbuster's another good example. And like a lot of times, if you actually think about, in a pragmatic sense, the current state of a lot of these tech companies like Google and Facebook, like Facebook is their strategy nowadays seems to be a lot of acquisition focused, right? Or try to just copy something. Like, for instance, Clubhouse. If you guys know what Clubhouse is, Google's like defense against them, not Google, Facebook's defense against them is just to release their own version of Clubhouse. So, but like Clubhouse has this advantage of it being like this new cool thing that users have adopted, downloaded, etc. And Google, like if you look at Google statistics, like Google's like main money maker is still like Google AdWords. It's not a lot of the other things that they're inventing. And so like it's definitely daunting when you're like going up against this big competitor and a VC's like, well, why isn't Facebook doing that? But like, if you have that drive and you have that passion, then I mean, you could beat it. I mean, Robinhood beat what? JP Morgan, or is beating JP Morgan?
Thank you.
Abigail, one kind of comment on that is like it's one of these things where like venture and entrepreneurship kind of encompasses such a broad array of things. So the answer is like it depends. But the key is that you are the best positioned to evaluate like what is it that is your competitive advantage? Is it like technology? Is it like an insight into a particular bleeding edge research that cannot be easily copied? Is that your value? Is it that you have an application that is like thoughtful of an existing technology that other people have invented? Is it that you can do the logistics, or that you see a new market? Like there's whatever that is, like just drill in that direction. Like if you understand it once you feel that you do, just that's when you just start putting your wattage behind it. And so Avi made this point, I think, in the very beginning. It's like try to get a little bit of product market fit and show that like it does actually solve the thing you're trying to do, and then you just focus resources behind that. And the point that Tom made about Google, like Google search is the money maker. It is a money printing machine, and it allows Google to do all sorts of other technology innovation and invention that led to YouTube and led to other thing in the Google Cloud, right? Like, but without Google search, that empire comes crumbling down. And so if you talk to Google, where do they put their level 10 and level 11 engineers, right? Where do they put their talent and their money, but like in what they pay people? It is often, if you show me your budget, I can tell you what your values are, is like kind of the insight that I think someone once gave me. And that's, I think, the same way you should structure it, is if you feel like you begin to understand your competitive advantage, that's where you should apply your resources.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give it, Chinmay, go ahead.
Yeah, so from my knowledge in the startup space, I think mentorship has been a really common theme. And so I was just wondering if any of y'all can kind of speak about how mentors have kind of changed your path in the startup environment, and how you would advise us to approach mentors if we were to pursue a specific idea.
I mean, this is definitely a topic that I've spent a lot of time with, different types of mentors. So I always tell people you outgrow your mentors, and so there's a part of actually like how you approach a new mentor. And then there's also, are you at the right stage for the mentor you currently have? because those are two different, because I feel like there's a lot of times where even as like advisors of a company, you know, I'm actually in this process now where I'm retiring some of my older advisors and essentially like have to like stop their vesting schedules, because it doesn't make sense for them to keep on advising the company because there is just nothing they can help us with at this time. And so one of the things that I always do is like mentors, moment your mentor becomes your champion and there's everything you're doing is like the best thing since sliced bread. It definitely is not necessarily a mentor. Mentors need to be challenging you, and they need to be, you know, actually giving you critical feedback. But I also think it's really important that you, like, for when you approach a mentor, it's very specific. So I think it is very important that you know, find someone that you might look up to or want to be like, or actually see yourself becoming, or have a path forward in that direction. So for me, when I was in academia, I spent a lot of time with the dean of the business school at Rice, and so this associate dean, and me and her just got to know each other a lot. And because I'm a stats PhD, I had to really learn a lot about, from a business perspective, how I approach everything from building Topl. And so once, you know, she kind of introduced me to other people, and, you know, I graduated from that mentorship, but it was a really specific, you know, went to her, had a specific ask about specific time commitment, whether she can actually give me that time commitment. Because I also think timing is important for mentors when they are in their life cycle. And if they're interested in actually mentoring people, there's a difference between also being interested and then just not having time. But a lot of people are definitely open to mentoring, but it's also just finding the mentor that's right for you at that stage of where you are, startup wise and also just life wise, in finding out what the next step in your career is. But I say you go for it. It's cold calling is also, you know, just start a conversation with someone if they like who you are. A lot of times I did the same thing. I reached out to a board member at Under Armour, and now I talk to her like every other week. So it's things like that where it's just, you know, there are people that you might really want to just go after and get to know. But you will be surprised at how many people are interested in actually mentoring others.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think mentorship is so important, finding individuals who, you know, you look up to. I always tell people when it comes to mentors, you know, it should be somebody who you envy, who you're like, oh my God, I aspire to be that, right? So, and one of the ways I found a lot of my mentors was through volunteering, right? So I volunteer often with Black Enterprise. And so they have this huge entrepreneurial summit that they do every year. And they invite a lot of high profile people. Like one year, you know, Janice Horroy was there. She's, you know, runs a multi-million-dollar business. And there were just so many individuals there. And so I got an upfront seat to those individuals. I was able to talk to them and shake hands with them and things like that. So I think one way to really find mentors is to kind of volunteer, find out where they are, and then go serve. Right? I'm all about giving first. So before I ask for anything, I try to find some way I can provide some value and service to them so that they're now more willing to help me.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, so before we run out of time real quick, I want to call out in the chat, Cole has sent out a feedback form. That's for our internal analytics committee within the Undergraduate Business Council. So if all the attendees can please fill it out after the event, just let us know how we did, what you liked, what you think we can do better. That just helps us so we can figure out how to make these events even better in the future. Yeah, so please fill that out, and I'll give it like 10, 15 seconds for somebody to raise their hand for a question. And if not, then I'll go ahead with one last individual question before we run out of time here. Okay, so I'll go ahead. This is a question for everyone, so anybody can speak out and answer. But what is the most insightful mistake that you think you've made in your venture / journey for your startups, or just, you know, as an entrepreneur?
I can jump on that grenade first, or Avi, if you want to.
No, go ahead, Jeremy. Go ahead.
Mine is very much like in the found, I came from this background of, special operations, like high trust, high octane teams with people with a very long shared kind of history and culture together. In that, you have to spend years before you can enter those realms. So you have a lot of kind of common lexicon, common values right out the gate. When starting a company, it's not like that. And I made the false assumption that what I thought was what other people necessarily shared. So to Tom's point, like, one of my early efforts had a painful co-founder breakup simply because I vetted every other person I hired far better than I did the initial co-founder relationship, because I took the fact that I was already aligned and knew someone to mean a lot more than it necessarily did. And I let a lot of things go, become true in my mind that I actually never double checked or followed up on. And within a very few short months, I quickly learned that I was wrong, right? And I did not do a good job in those early conversations with that co-founder around those expectations. I did not do a good job around kind of talking about equity and talking about what does it mean in different contexts and capacities. And as a result, we did not have the shared lexicon. We did not have shared understanding of something that, even though it was written down legally, was not seen through the same lens. And so ultimately, the care on the legal documents paid off, but in a way that it didn't have to, because having an honest and fruitful conversation up front that is more clear would have been totally possible and would have fixed a lot of the bad expectations that created some poisoning of the well. So my advice is very much to be thoughtful around what are you going for and what are you asking this person to do. It's very easy to trade on things like titles early on, and that's a valuable negotiation tool. But something that I set with everybody after that was essentially this expectation that you are not entitled to a title or a position forever. At some point, our company, if we're successful, we will reach a size and scale where I am not the best CEO. We should be very proud to hire a better CEO than me. In the same way that, the COO of a 10-person team or a 20-person team is not the same as a CEO of a 100-person team. And maybe your person can grow into that. And that is awesome when it works. But there should be nothing wrong or humiliating about the idea of bringing in a more experienced player to be the mentor and to be that person. And so setting those expectations early and having those conversations is critically important. And I keep bringing this up, but if people, one of the most common mistakes people make in their personal relationships is the exact same that they make in their business relationships, which is just a lack of clear expectation setting about what do you want. And it just isn't worth it in the end to not be honest about that up front. And so to whatever degree you can avoid learning that lesson yourself the hard way, just take the advice. If you ever need help talking about how to do a co-founder split or something, reach out to someone like us to talk about it, because there are good ethical ways to do it. And when you're both ignorant of them at the beginning, you can totally screw it up thinking that you're doing a good job. And so just be thoughtful about what you're asking of people to support you, whether it's a mentor or a co-founder or anything else. Make sure that you're both saying you're on the same page, and whenever possible, write that page down, write it down and reiterate it so that everybody's like, yes, that is what we discussed. And that is what I'm agreeing to.
Are you guys out of time?
No, you can still go ahead and answer for any of the participants.
Okay, I just maybe spend a minute or so. I know we are pretty much here, but I was going to say, where do I begin? Right, there's so many mistakes we all make along the way. So there's so many learnings that I can go on and on. But I think that one of the key learnings for me has been know your unit economics right from the get-go. What that means is it's not enough for you to build a product that people like. It's more important for you to make sure that you know how to distribute, sell, market, and retain customers. So I think understanding that right from the beginning is hugely important. In my previous company, I understood it a little bit too late, and that cost you a few years and a few $few million of runway. But I think, get to know your unit economics right from the get-go. Make sure that you're optimizing and figuring out how to make your operations as cost-effective as possible. And again, yes, money's out there in the venture world, but you got to build a company, I think, with the goal of making it sustainable and self-sustaining. Never build a company to go raise more money. Build a company to become as quickly as possible profitable. And once you do that, then investors will just line up at your doorstep, because everybody wants to fund a company that's already profitable, or at least they can see a path to getting profitable. So never build a company to go raise the next round and the next round. I think one learning has been, build it for self-sustenance and get to at least have a path to getting profitable as quickly as possible, and good things will happen along the way then.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Avi. And thank you so much to all the panelists for taking the time out of your nights or days to come out and talk to everyone. I'm sure this is super helpful for all the students who are interested in entrepreneurship or just starting their own kind of thing. So thank you all so much. I'll call it again in the chat. There's that feedback form. Fill it out, please, just so we can know how to improve these events in the future. And I will get that link and send it again in case it was too far up. So let me just do that real quick. And then the last thing is that so the recording of this will be sent out to everyone who RSVP'd to the event on Eventbrite. And if you want the recording and didn't get a chance to RSVP, then please email me so that I'll know to send it to you. I'll put my email in the chat right now. It's just ryan.brown@utexas.edu. So please email me if you want the recording and weren't able to RSVP to the Eventbrite. But otherwise, thank you all so much, and everyone have a great night.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.